The following video is rated D, so any dope or dopette can watch it. Thank you for taking the time to view this first installment of the Section 124 podcast. The Section 124 podcast provides the viewer with at the game observations from longtime Sixers season ticket holders at the Wells Fargo Center. The Section 124 podcast is the first of a series of blogs and podcasts developed and soon to be located at the Bleeping Philly Sports website. The site, blogs, and podcasts were all developed by a group of longtime hoops pickup players. Other categories will include Philadelphia, which will be a review of the week's prior Philly sporting events. Old School, where we will interview old-timers that will discuss how things were back in the day. Dear Diary will follow the daily life of a longtime 5 for 5 Philadelphia sports fan. Pickup will focus on the trials and tribulations of older players trying to still compete while maintain order in hoops pickup games. Our supporting content will include input on sports officiating, medical injuries, and we'll even have a parlay specialist for the gambling degenerates that like to play long shots. We will also form an organization that, once in place, will coerce these sports ownership groups to make positive changes for the fan base. No more crying to sports talk radio. We believe our content will appeal to the hardcore, high IQ 5 for 5 Philly sports fans and pickup players of all sports. We do have a favor to ask. Please be patient as we roll this site and build quality content. We are not professional YouTubers or bloggers yet, but we believe our content will carry us until we become tech savvy. We could have waited to build more content, but no guts, no glory. Again, thanks for your time. We do appreciate you. Welcome to the Section 124 report. The Section 124 report provides an at the game background experience by Sixer fans that attended the Sixers game at the Wells Fargo Center. I'm your host, Phil Sport. The Section 124 report is brought to you by the JCC, the Jewish Community Center. The best place to play is at the J. Mention this ad when signing up and get a lifetime free membership at the J. Nah. But if you're interested, call the Wilmington J and ask for Blaine, and he'll give you the best deal that month for new members. For this game, we are joined by our Sixer fan attendee and man in the field, Boston Kenny. Before I begin, I have to address the elephant in the room. Why is a fan named Boston Kenny our fan correspondent for a Sixers game? First off, Boston Kenny is a Boston transplant from over 40 years ago and has probably attended more 76er game than 99% of all Sixer diehards out there. Boston Kenny has been a Sixer season ticket holder since 1990, and in Section 124, he sits right behind the visitors' bench. Boston Kenny's identity is kept secret, so he's not hassled by future Sixer fans. Boston Kenny, how's it going?
Things are going fantastic. Thank you for having me.
Not a problem. So, Boston Kenny, you've been a Sixer season ticket holder since 1990.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
So you began with, let me think, you began with the spoon?
Yep. If everybody remembers Clarence Weatherspoon, he was one of the fan favorites back in 1990.
The spoon! Boston County, before we get into game specifics, let's discuss the process of getting into the Wells Fargo Center into your seat for a game. Since COVID, how has that changed?
Well, it's a lot slower process. There are more checkpoints. At this point now, you have to show proof of vaccination. as one of the parts of entering the Wells Fargo Center. You also need to then get through another set where you have to show and put together your valuables. So there's a security check, there's a COVID check, and of course, you've got to go through the ticket identification. So it's a much slower process than it was in the past.
Wow. Okay, Boston Kenny, moving on. Let's talk about the Sixers Celtics game on February 15th. The game I'm affectionately calling the Boston Valentine's Day Massacre. It just seemed like one of those games where one team can't miss and the other team couldn't throw the ball in the ocean.
It certainly was contagious on both sides. On the Celtics side, everybody was shooting well. Everybody was hitting shots. They broke the record of most three-pointers made in a single game, so that the Celtic team was on fire, whereas the Sixers, from their standpoint, again, from a contagious standpoint, it was a night where everybody was cold. Not one starter, not one person off the bench contributed with a high field goal percentage.
How did the fans take the trouncing? Were there any tiffs between the players, the coaches, or any of the fans in attendance?
The fans were somewhat quiet, which was a surprise, being a Boston fan here in Philly. Basically, there was one run where the Sixers cut it down to 17, where there's a little excitement in the building. Boston made another run. And after that, by the end of the third quarter, a great number of folks were leaving the building.
Was there any star power in attendance?
The owners were there. Josh Harris was there. David Blitzer. But from a star standpoint, I would say it probably didn't have the star power that other games would have, i.e. Lakers, i.e. Golden State.
Getting back to the game, how early did the crowds exit, or did they hang to the end?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, most of them were hopeful for a run, but I would say by end of third, early fourth, most of the folks were heading out.
Yeah.
At
Last
least on the
question.
76ers side. The Celtic fans stayed in there primarily. They don't see this type of game too often. Plus, anybody that was interested in the bench players got to see a lot of bench time.
Last question for you. Can I call you BK in short for Boston Kenny?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, as a longtime game expert, how do you leave a game? There's got to be some balance between watching the end of a close game and getting out early to beat the traffic.
Well, after 30 some odd years, we've pretty much got it down to a science. We have found areas in the parking lot that give us our best exit value. And since we are in a section 124, for us, it's an easy out. It's up the stairs and we head out, and we have gotten it down to a pretty quick exit strategy.
Well, Sixer fans, it was just one game, and I've got to get this dig in. The after the Boston Massacre the other night, your Celtics, Boston Kenny, lost at home to the Pistons, while the Sixers went out to Milwaukee and in the Milwaukee Stadium handled Giannis a loss. So go figure. It's just one game in a series of a bunch of them.
Sure is. It's a marathon. And it was interesting. I was talking to somebody that was sitting next to me, and I mentioned to him I'm willing to, I believe after watching Embiid all year that he would bounce back, which he has after poor performances. And more importantly, I in my own heart knew the Celtics were not going to shoot that well and would have a letdown against an up and coming Detroit squad.
Well, that's Boston Kenny's report. We thank Boston Kenny for checking in. Now, the Section 124 report and Boston Kenny was brought to you by the Smarty Pants series of books, Basketball Smarty Pants and Computer Repair Smarty Pants, the best books ever written on each topic. Smarty Pants books can be found on Amazon. Now, for our next Section 124 report, we are going to have a report on the debut of the Sixers' newest player, James Harden. It'll be his first home appearance, so be sure to join us. Thank you, Boston County, and until that report, go Sixers. Da 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 76ers.